Welcome to the Protagonist Pub. My name is Tammy, and today we are going to do the Epistolary Query Tag. It is an original tag by Anne at In Search of Wonder. I will link her video down below. And it is a wonderfully unique tag. It is perfect for Epistolary January, which Anne is hosting with a bunch of lovely co-hosts, and I will link my epistolary recommendations for January. As you know, I have a bunch of epistolary novels in progress at the time of this filming. I have finished 2 epistolary novels so far this month, and it has just been pure joy. So this tag is in perfect keeping with the theme for January. So the first question is, on a scale of 1 to 5, how do you feel about the format? 1 being you hate it, and 5 being you love it. So it's about a 4 for me. It really depends on the book and the depth of character work in the book. I have a couple of examples. They are all in journal format. One would be The Woman in White, the Unselected Journals of Emma M. Lyon, Volume 1, and Dracula. So the journal entries in Dracula are absolutely fantastic. They provide backstory, they provide atmosphere and history, and they draw you in. And you don't even really realize that you're reading journal entries because it just feels like a novel. It's fantastic. And in The Woman in White, once again, they're journal entries, and it's a little more obvious that they're journal entries because there's a lot of summary going on because of the way it was released, which is fine. But it tells, again, a complete story, and it's twisty and turny, and you get little glimmers every once in a while of background stories and hints, and I absolutely adored those 2 books. I absolutely adored them. They were fantastic. They were late 2024 reads, and I was blown away by both of them. I just finished the Unselected Journals of Emma M. Lyon, and it was short, just over 100 pages. Some of those pages had, 1-sentence journal entries. And it is the polar opposite of the previous 2 books. It is light and fluffy. There is not a lot of character development. There is not a lot of backstory. There's not a lot of depth. I'm not saying I dislike them. It left me wanting more, which I understand. It keeps the reader engaged and ready to pick up the next volume. So I don't falter for that. It was unsatisfying. So that's why it's a 4 for me. So the follow-up question is, is question prompt 2 is, what about it do you love or do you hate? I love reading character thoughts. It is a much more intimate, personal relationship between reader and character. It isn't as distant. What I don't like about it is it gives authors, more so modern day authors than classical authors, an out to do very little character growth and depth. So it really depends on the author. It really depends on the format. It just depends. They all have the opportunity to be great, but when it does not work for me, it really does not work for me. Okay, prompt 3. What is your favorite adaptation, or what epistolary novel would you like to see adapted? I am not a huge movie person. Just not. If I'm going to watch TV or go to the movies, it's going to be a crime mystery drama. My guilty pleasure in life is British mystery dramas, just ask my husband. And if we go to the movies, which we rarely do, we generally watch them at home if we do. They tend to be fantasy or science fiction action movies. He's not into rom-coms, and I'm not into, his preferred choice of, the overly scientific documentary. So we don't watch a lot of movies. So I really don't have an answer to this one. Prompt 4. What literary character do you wish you could correspond with? This is very easy. Will the Fool. He is the narrator of the autobiography of Henry VIII by Margaret George. I read this book eons and centuries ago. It is one of those books I will not mind rereading when I finally get my hands on a copy that I like. Will the Fool was just amazing. I cannot recommend this book enough. He is the quintessential jester, and yet the wisdom of the fool is there. I cannot recommend this book enough. I cannot. Okay, prompt 5. Who is a character from history that you wish you could peek into their real, unedited, uncensored journal? I had a good think about this, and I probably have a couple. So first, and this assumes I could read and understand her journals. I don't speak ancient French, and my Latin is non-existent. And that would be Eleanor of Aquitaine. She had such an amazing life, and her impact on Western history cannot be understated. You don't think about it, but that woman and her ancestors and the impact she had during her lifetime was astounding. She wasn't just powerful because she was to whom she was married and the sons she bore, but she was powerful in her own right. She had her own lands. She traveled to the Holy Land. She had a life that defies the accepted cultural norm in 20th century, 21st century mythology that women are powerless, and they have always been powerless, and they have always been the downtrodden of society. And she's not the only figure I could point to in ancient history that disproves that, but her journals would be fascinating, assuming she kept them and assuming I could read them. Her 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 thoughts on marriage and childbirth and her squabbles with Henry and traveling to the Holy Land and what she saw and the crusade and all of it would just, I think my brain would be forever happy. It would just be forever ever happy. Okay. And who else? I need to pull up something. Hang on. So, the second person from history I would choose would be Saint Elizabeth Ann Seton. She is the first native born American saint to be canonized. And she is the founder of the first Catholic school in America. And because of her, I went to Catholic school. Because of her, I got the education that I did. Because of her, and the structures she put in place and everything she did in her life, she laid down the foundation for the education I received. And she was born in pre-revolutionary America. She was a convert to Catholicism, and she founded an order of nuns. She was married and had children, and her husband died, and then she went on to found a Catholic school in, I believe it was Baltimore. And she is just an inspiration. And she is so quintessential in, without even, being consciously aware of it growing up, and who I grew up to be and how I grew up to think. And I thank her daily for that, because of the foundation she laid. I grew up with an inquisitive mind, one that's always curious, one that's always trying to learn something new. And for that reason, she is just a giant blessing in my life. And she was only recently canonized. She was canonized in 1875 by Pope Paul VI, and that was 150 years after her death. And she is just, I think a lot of Catholic school children don't realize how much they owe to this amazing woman. And I think it would just be an absolute privilege to, have the opportunity to read her journals, the death of her husband, her time in Italy, her, the birth of her children, conversion, coming back home, setting up schools, the whole nine yards, founding a religious order. they would be fascinating to me. So that is that answer. Okay. Prompt number 6. What is your favorite literary letter? Now this, once again, draws on my Catholic school education, and it is Letters on England by Voltaire. I read this in French class. It was probably junior year. No, sophomore year. It was sophomore year that we read this. And they are 24 brief letters from Voltaire by Voltaire. They're really not written to anybody. They're just written in letter format, in which he describes his stay in London, and he shares his thoughts on the state of England, especially in comparison to France at the time. And the most famous quote out of it that I recall is that he said, and I quote, "I think and write like a free Englishman." The entire work is really his admiration for politics and the freedoms that existed in England that did not exist in France in his day. And, the fact that you were free to speak your mind, and political movement between classes did happen. And it was really a manifesto to the citizens of France that the life they were living was not comparable to the English directly across the channel. And they're 24, brief letters that really illustrate the difference between the two nations. He talks about the importance of freedom of religion. He talks about science and politics and economy, and they sound more boring than they were. They were even approachable, as a sophomore in high school. And they were a challenge to read in French. Now, I never read them in English. I don't think I could read them in French today. But, I read them more than 4 decades ago. Oh, Lord. Reminding myself how old I am. I think everybody should read them at least once, because they still hold lessons for us today. And especially, I think my UK counterparts could really use a reminder that at one point in their, country's history, they had freedom of expression, and they don't have that anymore. Prompt 7. Which novel that is not epistolary do you think would work well as one? Now, this is going to be surprising. Recently read this one too. I forgot to go grab it. That is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. I actually honestly believe that it would have worked far, far better for me personally if it was told in journal format from the point of view of the March sisters. I don't think the narrative format works for me today. Did it work for me as a, young reader 40 plus years ago? It absolutely did. Does it hold up in time for me? No, it does not. Do I think it would work far, far better if it was journal entries from Joe and Amy and all of them and just their own personal thoughts versus what sometimes feels like very forced dialogue, especially in Good Wives. I think Good Wives in particular would hold up much better as an epistolary novel. I realize that's going to be controversial. Don't come for me at the comments. Prompt number 8. Which epistolary novel do you wish you could read again for the very first time? This answer is going to appear a lot. The Autobiography of Henry VIII by Margaret George. I love that novel. It is fantastic. And even though I just finished it, honorable mention here is going to be The Woman in the Library by Solari Gentile. It is a standalone mystery, and it is not 100% epistolary. And neither is the autobiography of William or Henry VIII, to be honest. But The Woman in the Library, what is an epistolary format, is powerful and just is full of twists you didn't expect. Now, prompt 9. If you were a character in an epistolary novel, what would your stationery look like? I am actually old enough that letter writing is within my memory. Actual physical letters written in longhand on stationery with matching envelopes. I even had sealing wax at one point in my life. And if you know me, you know this won't be a surprise to you. My stationery was one of two types. It either had Pooh Bear on it in some representation, or it was floral. Always had a clean white background, and it was always a floral or Pooh theme. I had corresponding envelopes, and my sealing wax always matched my letters. Now, did I exchange? Do I, still keep personal stationery? I do not. Unfortunately, it is a dying art, and I think society is much poorer for it. There is something magical about getting an actual letter in the mail versus, an email. And there is something truly magical when you read the love letters between your parents and your grandparents and stretching back through time. And there is no modern day equivalent, and we have lost something as a society not having love letters exchanged. Okay, prompt 10. what is the first epistolary novel you can recall reading? I'm trying to think. I'm trying to remember if Harriet the Spy had journal entries. I don't think it did. So I'm going to go with the autobiography of Henry VIII. I know that had journal entries in it and letters. I'm thinking, and yeah, we're just going to go with Henry VIII. Prompt 11. Which literary character would you write to for advice? That is a very good question. I had to stop and think for a minute. And it's probably because I'm in the middle of reading it. Hopefully I might actually finish it tonight or tomorrow. I'm going to say Anne Elliot from Persuasion by Jane Austen. And you're probably scratching your head going, Tammy, why? Anne Elliot is a lot like me. And she's the family observer. She's the one in the background. She's the quote unquote dependable one. You know, Flighty Mary doesn't want to take care of her own kids, so Anne steps in and does it. You know, it would be Anne Elliot. She's just steady, and nothing really seems to sway her. She has great upset, and she just kind of buries it. And the opposite extreme of that would be, because I'm again in the middle of reading it, Anne of Green Gables, because she too, it's very funny that they're both Annes here, is very like me. She is excitable and she has a temper, and when the temper goes off, it is explosive, and she has an ability to hold a grudge for far longer than she should. And I too am guilty of that. And I didn't realize it quite so much when I was a younger reader of Anne, but as today, as I'm reading it, I can definitely see me in Anne at the same age and me in Anne at this age. There are some similarities there that I need to reflect on. I'm not going to lie. So it would be those two Annes. And they're very different than one another, but they have some similarities there. So, okay, prompt number 12. Tag 2 channels. So I am going to tag Jen over at Jen's Reading Life, and I'm going to tag Jess over at Pages and Grace. They are both wonderful booktubers who have very interesting content and channels, and I adore them both. So if you're not subscribed, go give them a follow and have fun with the tag ladies. So those are my answers to the epistolary query tag. Thank you to Anne for tagging me. If you would like to do this tag, please feel free. I will leave Anne's video down below and all the channel links. And I will see you here next time at the Protagonist Pub.